Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The wizarding world is famous for its spectacular spells, flashes, explosions, curses, and miracles at every turn. Yet there are things that cannot be solved by charms or hexes alone. That is when potions enter the scene, a complex, temperamental, but sometimes truly powerful branch of magic. Still, J.K. Rowling was remarkably consistent in her world-building. In the magical world, there are not only essential spells and potions without which a wizard would be helpless, but also those whose purpose raises questions, to put it mildly. Today we will talk about exactly those strange, questionable, and nearly useless potions. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Pumpkin Juice Potion. Transfiguration is one of the core subjects at Hogwarts. By mastering it, a wizard can transform one object into another, often instantly and with little effort. However, as it turns out, a wand is not the only tool for such tricks. In the video game LEGO Harry Potter Years 1-4, the player is tasked with brewing a pumpkin juice potion for Professor Snape. Its effect is simple and frighteningly straightforward. When brewed perfectly, it turns a person's head into an actual pumpkin, and that raises only one question: or why? If transfiguration can achieve the same result faster and more precisely, this potion feels like a joke taken far too seriously. Number 2. Aging Potion. This is a potion we have seen not only on the pages of the books, but also on the big screen. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Fred and George Weasley decide to use the aging potion to trick the magical barrier Dumbledore placed around the Goblet of Fire. The idea was bold, but as expected, doomed to fail. The goblet instantly exposed the deception, rewarding the twins with a spectacular, yet humiliating, bearded punishment. If you think about it, the practical value of this potion is highly questionable. For changing one's appearance, there is the far more effective Polyjuice Potion, and deliberately aging yourself is hardly something a sane person would willingly do. Number 3. Hair-Raising Potion. In the wizarding world, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of dubious potions, but very few can rival the hair-raising potion in sheer pointlessness. Its effect is perfectly reflected in its name. Anyone who drinks it immediately has their hair stand on end. The potion is mentioned in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and what makes it especially amusing is that its preparation is taught quite seriously at Hogwarts. Pranks? Possibly. An extravagant hairstyle? Theoretically. But in practical terms, it is simply a silly potion with an effect that offers absolutely no real benefit. Number 4. Babbling Beverage. Another strange drink whose effect causes the drinker to spout complete nonsense. The potion is mentioned in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix in a scene where Harry attempts to pass an important message to Snape. I haven't the faintest idea. If I wanted nonsense shouted at me, I'd give you a babbling beverage, Potter. The potion never appears in the films, but its effect is easy to imagine. Something between an uncontrollable stream of consciousness and total verbal chaos. What makes it even more pointless is the fact that the wizarding world already has a babbling curse that serves the same purpose. Why it needed to be duplicated in potion form remains a mystery. Number 5. Baruffio's Brain Elixir. On paper, this potion sounds like a dream come true for any student. First mentioned in Order of the Phoenix, Baruffio's Brain Elixir supposedly does not just enhance mental abilities, but makes a person genuinely smarter. However, there is a catch. Potion maker Gethsemane Prickle claimed that the brew is more likely to scramble the drinker's brain than provide any real benefit. What is even more suspicious is that we never actually see the potion work. If it truly enhanced intelligence, Hogwarts students would be pouring it into their morning tea. Since that clearly does not happen, the logical conclusion is that either the effect is extremely weak or the potion simply does not work at all. Number 6. Gregory's Unction. This potion was invented by Gregory the Smarmy, and its effect is almost unsettling. If you give it to a stranger, they will immediately start believing you are their best friend. At first glance, it seems useful, especially if one ignores moral concerns. The problem is that the wizarding world already has the Imperious Curse and love potions, which offer similar but far more flexible effects. On top of that, Gregory's unction works only on strangers, severely limiting its usefulness and turning it into more of a curiosity than a truly practical magical tool. Number 7. Hiccuping solution. The hiccuping potion may be the most absurd concoction ever brewed. Its purpose is exactly what its name suggests: endless hiccups, no escalation, no twist. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry notices students trading such drinks on the Hogwarts Express. One line captures the moment. Someone nearby kept hiccuping uncontrollably, to the great amusement of his friends. Amusement, brief and shallow. A remembered incident involves Neville Longbottom, who accepted a vial thinking it was harmless pumpkin juice. Within moments, every breath was broken by a sharp hic. Laughter followed, then boredom. Professor Lupin eventually intervened and said calmly, "Magic should do more than annoy." Neville looked relieved. Everyone else looked disappointed. That is the problem. The potion does nothing meaningful. It does not frighten. It does not teach. It barely entertains. Hiccups are not dangerous. They are not dramatic. In a world full of powerful curses, choosing this potion feels lazy. As one student scribbled in a margin years ago, if your magic only irritates, you have wasted your talent. Number 8. Moaning Myrtle's Sleep Draught. Myrtle's sleeping draught sounds useful until it is tried. The recipe is attributed to Moaning Myrtle, preserved in supplementary magical notes passed among students. It does cause sleep, instantly. One line describes it bluntly. The drinker will lose consciousness almost at once. The problem is duration. The sleep lasts minutes, sometimes less. The awakening is worse than the drowsiness that came. 4. A Ravenclaw story is often told about Terry Boot during exam season. Desperate, he followed Myrtle's instructions exactly. He drank. He collapsed. 2 minutes later, he sat up, groggy and irritated, his notes unread, his head heavier than before. Professor Flitwick later remarked, "That was not rest, Mr. Boot, that was interruption." The potion solved nothing. That is why the draught makes little sense. If the goal is true sleep, the draught of living death already exists. Longer, deeper, effective. Myrtle's version only steals time. The book itself carries a warning in faded ink. Brief sleep without recovery weakens the mind. 2 minutes lost, no benefit gained, only fatigue remains. Number 9. Dancing Tonic. The dancing tonic sounds playful only in theory. In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, it is mentioned almost casually, yet the description is unsettling. The drink forces the body into constant movement, not rhythm, not choice, just motion. One line notes, the subject will continue to dance until the potion's effect fully dissipates. That can take hours. Smiles fade quickly. There is an old tale told by former Hogwarts students about Seamus Finnegan during a Hogsmeade weekend. A friend slipped a few drops into his butterbeer. Seamus laughed at first. Then his legs refused to stop. He danced through the streets, through embarrassment, through pain. Madame Rosmerta later said he was still tapping when the sun went down. No applause followed, only exhaustion. That is the problem. What begins as entertainment ends as cruelty. In a world where the spell Tarantallegra already exists, the tonic feels redundant. Worse, it lingers. Spells can be countered. Potions must run their course. The book itself warns, prolonged enchantment of the body may lead to collapse. Dancing, when forced, stops being joy. It becomes endurance. Number 10. Sneezing syrup. The sneezing syrup is not a rumor or a student invention. It is listed plainly in Miranda Goshawk's Book of Spells, described as causing repeated, involuntary sneezing episodes lasting several minutes. No mystery, no elegance, just sneezing, again and again. The book offers no practical application, only the effect, as if that alone justified its existence. One often cited incident involves Ernie Macmillan during a revision session in the library. He mistook the syrup for a calming draught meant to clear his head before exams. The silence shattered instantly. Sneezes echoed between shelves. Madame Pince appeared like a summoned curse. "This is a library," she hissed. Ernie could not answer. He sneezed instead. The problem with the syrup is simplicity. Too simple. If the intention was humor, the result is dull and predictable. If disruption was the goal, there are faster and more effective methods. A minor jinx, a basic hex. Even Goshawk herself notes, dryly, effects lacking variation lose their impact. The syrup does exactly one thing. It does it loudly, then nothing else. In a world filled with creative magic, sneezing syrup feels unnecessary. It offers no advantage, no surprise, only consequences. Interrupted lessons, lost patience, detention slips signed by annoyed professors. As one margin note in an old Hogwarts copy reads, "If your potion can be replaced by pepper, reconsider your craft." Number 11. Sparkling Teeth Elixir. The elixir of gleaming teeth exists beyond rumor. It is mentioned in supplemental potion references used by advanced students, described with unusual precision. One line reads, "Produces a radiant dental glow visible in low-light conditions. Not whitening, not polishing, actual light. Teeth that shine, even in darkness, even when the mouth is closed." There is a well-known anecdote involving Zacharias Smith during a late evening in the Hufflepuff common room. He drank the elixir out of curiosity. Moments later, his grin lit up the room like a lantern. The fire was unnecessary. Students shielded their eyes. Someone laughed. Professor Sprout did not. "Mr. Smith," she said calmly, "you appear to have turned yourself into a warning. The potion's problem is not danger, but absurdity. If the goal is healthy or attractive teeth, magic already offers subtler solutions, simple charms, proper potions, even mundane hygiene. One potion guide notes dryly, visibility is not beauty. The elixir does not enhance. It announces, stealth becomes impossible, night missions fail, conversations stop. What remains is spectacle without purpose, teeth glowing like festive lights, faces remembered for the wrong reason. No wizard needs to shine from the mouth in daily life, especially not in dark corridors, especially not near Filch. As a scribbled note in a student copy once said, "If people can find you by your smile alone, you have brewed the wrong potion." Number 12. Uncontrollable Laughter Potion. The potion of uncontrollable laughter sounds harmless at first, even tempting. A sip, and the world becomes funny, but the laughter does not stop. It breaks out at funerals, during detentions, in moments meant for silence. One old potions handbook used at Hogwarts warns plainly, laughter without cause is rarely joy. More often, it is chaos. Students learned that line the hard way. There is a story often told about Percy Weasley during his 5th year. During a prefect meeting, he accidentally drank from the wrong vial, mistaking it for pepper-up potion. Minutes later, as Professor McGonagall discussed rule violations, Percy collapsed into helpless laughter. He laughed at detentions. He laughed at house points lost. McGonagall's voice cut through the room. "This is not amusing, Mr. Weasley." Percy could not stop. The potion appears in Hogwarts brewing manuals only as a warning. It is listed beside failed experiments and impractical concoctions. If the goal is humor, the books recommend simpler methods. A joke, a conversation, even a mild charm like Rictus Sempra. One passage notes, forced laughter disrupts the mind more than it lifts the spirit. The potion removes choice. That is its flaw. The real danger is timing. Uncontrolled laughter draws suspicion. It ruins confessions. It shatters serious moments. A grieving friend laughs. A witness laughs in court. The potion does not create happiness. It creates noise. As one margin note in an old textbook reads, "Magic that ignores context is magic best left unused." And so the potion remains where it belongs, brewed rarely, drunk foolishly, regretted always. Number 13. Stink Bomb Brew. The potion of foul odour is whispered about more than it is documented. According to Hogwarts student lore, the drink surrounds the consumer with a thick, clinging stench, rotten eggs, spoiled fish, and something far worse that no one can quite describe. It was allegedly invented by a group of Slytherin students as a practical joke, most often deployed against unsuspecting Gryffindors. One former student recalled hearing an older prefect mutter, "It smelled like the Black Lake had crawled out and died in the corridor." The potion's reputation spread quickly, even without written records. The most famous story involves a fourth-year Gryffindor who drank from the wrong goblet during a late-night common room gathering. Within seconds, the corridor outside the fat lady's portrait became unbearable. Nearly headless Nick reportedly drifted straight through the wall and recoiled. "I endured centuries of decay," he complained, but that was quite unnecessary. By morning, the stench still lingered. Filch arrived with his mop and fury intact. Despite its notoriety, the potion never became popular. Brewing it was said to be worse than drinking it. The ingredients spoiled quickly. The fumes alone could make a cauldron room uninhabitable. One potion student joked, "Snape could forgive many things, but not a classroom that smelled like death." That alone discouraged most pranksters. Even Slytherins knew when a joke went too far. More importantly, the potion had no real purpose. If the goal was intimidation, a simple threatening charm would do the job faster and cleaner. The potion of foul odour offered only consequences: 2 days of detention, scrubbing stone floors, Filch watching every move. As one student supposedly said after being caught, "The smell fades, detention does not." Number 14. Eternal Belch Elixir. The elixir of everlasting burping occupies a strange corner of magical lore, one that feels almost embarrassed by its own existence. Unlike potions brewed to heal bones, sharpen the mind, or bend luck itself, this concoction offers no clear benefit, only an unrelenting physical response that turns the human body into an unwilling instrument. After ingestion, the drinker begins to burp loudly and uncontrollably, the sounds not limited to ordinary gastric noises but reshaped into articulate impressions, thunderous detonations, or even recognizable names, as if the potion had a mischievous sense of humor embedded in its very fumes. Those who encountered the elixir for the first time often described a brief moment of laughter followed by deep regret. The initial burp might provoke amusement, but as minutes stretch into hours, the joke curdles. One former Ravenclaw prefect recorded that after 3 hours he could no longer sit in the library without drawing glares, each eruption echoing between the shelves like a poltergeist with indigestion. This strange endurance element separates the elixir from most prank potions, which tend to burn bright and fade fast, leaving only a memory and perhaps a faint smell of smoke. It is precisely this disproportion between cause and effect that makes the potion so unsettling. In the magical world, even the most frivolous spells usually obey some internal logic, but the elixir of everlasting burping feels like an experiment that escaped its creator's control. The potion's unpredictability is its defining trait. One moment, a genteel hiccup, the next, a booming imitation of a dragon's roar. Witnesses have claimed to hear burps shaped like words, including once the unmistakable syllables of Snape uttered in a nasal sneer that made onlookers flinch in reflexive fear. The shadow of Severus Snape looms heavily over any discussion of potion-making gone wrong or gone too far. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, he reminds his students, "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion-making." That quote has often been used to illustrate how far the elixir of everlasting burping strays from subtlety. There is no elegance in a potion that hijacks the body's reflexes for hours, transforming the drinker into a spectacle rather than a subject of magical refinement. The potion is rumoured to have originated not in an official textbook, but in marginal notes passed between experimental brewers, the kind who valued novelty over utility. These notes described it almost apologetically, as if the inventor knew it lacked purpose but could not resist completing the brew. The idea that magic itself sometimes produces dead ends is uncomfortable, especially in a culture that reveres innovation. Yet this elixir stands as proof that not every successful brew deserves to exist simply because it can. Attempts to justify the potion's usefulness have been creative but unconvincing. One argument claimed it could be used as an endurance test for auras under social pressure, forcing them to maintain composure while emitting absurd noises. Another suggested it might function as a distraction spell substitute in stealth operations. Both theories collapse under scrutiny because the potion's lack of control makes it unreliable. A distraction that cannot be switched off becomes a liability, and no aura wants to announce their position with a perfectly timed imitation of an exploding cauldron. The most famous anecdote attached to the elixir involves George Weasley, whose curiosity for anything absurd is well documented. According to shop law, he once considered adding the potion to the inventory of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes as part of an experimental, unflappable product line. The idea was to market it as the ultimate test of nerve, a potion that would force the drinker to endure embarrassment without flinching. Even in a store famous for nosebleed nougats and canary creams, this proposal raised eyebrows. Customers who sampled early prototypes reportedly laughed for less than a minute before their expressions shifted from delight to horror. The relentless nature of the burping transformed humor into discomfort and discomfort into disgust. A shop assistant later admitted that the potion violated an unspoken rule of joke magic. The victim should always want the joke to end. Here, the joke lingered like an unwelcome guest, impossible to usher out politely, staining the reputation of the prank rather than enhancing it. The magical literature offers subtle warnings about such excess. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, it is noted that magical effects often reflect the intent behind them, amplifying carelessness into chaos. The elixir of everlasting burping seems to embody this principle perfectly. Conceived as a fleeting gag, it magnifies that impulse until it overwhelms the drinker's autonomy. The potion does not teach a lesson gently, it shouts it repeatedly through the body's own rebellion. What makes the elixir particularly grotesque is its auditory creativity. Unlike ordinary burps, these eruptions mimic sounds stored somewhere between memory and imagination. One former Hufflepuff described hearing his own burps repeat phrases spoken earlier that day, distorted but recognizable, as if the potion were mocking him. This uncanny echo effect blurs the line between physical reaction and magical intrusion, raising uncomfortable questions about how deeply such a potion interacts with the mind. The setting of Hogwarts has seen countless mishaps, yet even there the elixir feels out of place. In a castle where staircases move and portraits gossip, constant explosive burping disrupts the delicate background hum of magic. Professors reportedly banned the potion outright after a single incident in the Great Hall, where a student's stomach produced a noise so loud It rattled the windows and silenced conversation for a full minute. There is also a social cruelty embedded in the potion's design. Many prank items rely on surprise, but this elixir traps the victim in prolonged humiliation. The wizarding world, for all its eccentricities, places high value on personal dignity, especially in public spaces like classrooms and common rooms. A potion that strips that dignity for hours crosses a line from playful to punitive, echoing punishments rather than jokes. Number 15, Bubblehead Potion Game Version. In the shadowy margins of Hogwarts practical magic, there exists a concoction so visually striking and so conceptually confused that it feels less like a potion and more like an accidental joke preserved in liquid form, the so-called head bubble potion. Its brief appearance in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince granted it a strange kind of semi-canonicity, a footnote in magical history that never quite earned its place beside proper brews. The moment the potion is consumed, a vast, shimmering soap bubble blossoms around the drinker's head, swallowing their face and replacing human features with a wobbling sphere of translucent foam. One can breathe inside it perfectly safely, but the visual effect is so absurd that dignity evaporates faster than a spilled vial of Veritaserum on a warm dungeon floor. The bubble itself is described as elastic and faintly iridescent, catching the torchlight like a child's toy, sold in a Muggle fair. From a distance, the afflicted witch or wizard appears to have transformed into a walking bath accessory, their head reduced to something more appropriate for scrubbing cauldrons than engaging in serious spell work. Even within the exaggerated aesthetics of magical mishaps, this potion feels uniquely humiliating. Hogwarts students are no strangers to odd side effects: purple boils, antlers, unexpected feathers. Yet those accidents usually suggest raw magical force gone awry. The head bubble potion, by contrast, looks deliberate, almost lovingly crafted to provoke laughter rather than respect. According to its conceptual blueprint, the potion was meant to assist with underwater exploration, allowing the drinker to breathe freely while submerged. In theory, it echoes the logic behind the Bubblehead charm, a spell with a respectable pedigree in magical education. In practice, however, the potion seems to misunderstand the very nature of magical problem-solving. Where spells are adaptable, subtle, and dismissible with a flick of the wand, this brew announces itself loudly and refuses to be ignored. The bubble does not merely provide air, it demands attention, wobbling grotesquely with every step, turning even the most disciplined Ravenclaw into a spectacle. The irony becomes sharper when one recalls that canonical magic already solved the problem elegantly. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the atmosphere at Hogwarts is thick with advanced experimentation, students pushing spells beyond textbook examples. The Bubblehead charm is mentioned as a known technique, and its logic is straightforward enough to be summarized in a single narrative aside. A transparent bubble enclosed the head, allowing the caster to breathe freely. This is magic functioning as it should, efficient, reversible, and discreet. Against such elegance, the potion's clownish excess feels almost insulting. Professor Horace Slughorn, a man who measures magical worth by usefulness and prestige, would never have collected such a recipe in his little black book. His admiration is reserved for potions that change the course of events, not ones that turn the drinker into a walking joke. Slughorn praises subtle brilliance, noting at one point that true mastery lies in effects that seem effortless, magic that leaves no mess behind. The head bubble potion leaves nothing but mess, visual and conceptual, an effect that cannot be undone without waiting it out or resorting to additional magic. The potion's greatest sin is not its uselessness, but its redundancy. Hogwarts already teaches aquatic adaptation through charms and transfigurations, and even second-year students learn that magic should enhance the wizard, not replace their identity with a novelty prop. Imagine attempting underwater transfiguration while your head floats inside a wobbling sphere, refracting your vision and distorting sound. Precision becomes guesswork, concentration collapses, and any attempt at dignity dissolves into farce. The potion does not support learning, it actively undermines it. In the video game's classroom context, the brew exists primarily as a mechanic, a visual shorthand for lesson learned. Yet stripped of that meta-logic, its presence becomes deeply questionable. Hogwarts is a place where even failures are meant to teach something meaningful. When Neville Longbottom melts a cauldron, the lesson is about patience and preparation. When a head bubble potion is consumed, the lesson seems to be that embarrassment is inevitable and laughter is the only reasonable response. One cannot ignore the social consequences either. The wizarding world, for all its eccentricities, is acutely aware of appearance. A student walking the corridors with a giant soap bubble for a head would instantly become the subject of whispered jokes and moving stairway snickers. Fred and George Weasley, masters of intentional absurdity, built careers out of controlled chaos. Their joke products work precisely because they are optional and self-aware. The head bubble potion lacks that self-awareness. It traps the user in unintended comedy. The potion's failure also highlights a deeper divide between spellcraft and potion making. Spells are expressions of will and wand work, immediate and responsive. Potions are slow, deliberate, and meant to produce stable, predictable outcomes. When a potion produces something as visually unstable as a wobbling bubble, it betrays its own discipline. Even Polyjuice Potion, notorious for its grotesque transformations, serves a strategic purpose. It deceives, infiltrates, and alters fate. The head bubble potion deceives no one except perhaps its creator, who believed novelty could substitute for necessity. The books repeatedly emphasize that magic should align with intent. A line describing advanced spell use observes that magic always leaves traces of the witch or wizard who cast it. The head bubble potion leaves only the trace of poor judgment. It does not reflect bravery, intelligence, or cunning. It reflects a willingness to accept spectacle over substance. In a school that prizes ingenuity, that is a quiet condemnation. It is telling that the potion never appears in standard curricula, not even as a cautionary example. Professors prefer controlled failures, not uncontrolled ridicule. Even in underwater environments like the Black Lake, students rely on charms, gillyweed, or transfiguration. Solutions that integrate with the body rather than mock it. The head bubble potion sits awkwardly outside this tradition, an orphaned idea with no practical home. Number 16, Roaring Potion. The Roaring Potion sits awkwardly on the shelves of magical history, an artifact that seems to exist only to provoke laughter, irritation, or scholarly embarrassment. According to one marginal appendix attached to The Tales of Beedle the Bard, the potion was devised by an unnamed but notoriously eccentric potioneer who sought to liberate the human voice from the modesty imposed by polite society. The potion does exactly that and nothing more. The moment it is swallowed, the drinker's voice becomes an uncontrollable roar, every sound magnified to the force of a lion's bellow. There is no dial, no mental discipline that softens the effect. A cough becomes thunder, a whisper shatters windows. Even breathing too loudly draws startled glances from portraits and poltergeists alike. The account in Beedle's appendix describes a test subject greeting his neighbor with a casual "hello," only to send chickens scattering and a nearby fence collapsing under the sonic impact. The potion's inventor reportedly took this as a success, writing in his notes that the human throat, when freed from restraint, reveals its true majestic nature. Yet even Beedle, usually indulgent toward magical oddities, added a dry comment that the potion was better suited to empty fields than to civilized wizarding society. This single observation hints at the central problem. Magic that cannot adapt to context often becomes a liability rather than a tool. Supporters of the potion's potential occasionally suggest defensive applications. One might imagine a lone witch confronting a burglar and unleashing a roar so terrifying that the intruder flees in panic. The theory appears reasonable until one considers the reality described in the same appendix. The roaring effect does not discriminate between threat and necessity. A startled shout in the middle of the night would not merely frighten a thief, but wake every resident in a multi-story building, alert the local magical law enforcement patrol, and quite possibly cause structural damage. As Beadle wryly noted, a spell may be aimed, a potion, once swallowed, obeys only its nature. The roaring potion becomes even more puzzling when contrasted with existing charms. The sonorous spell, taught to Hogwarts students with little fanfare, allows a witch or wizard to amplify their voice at will, adjusting volume according to need. It can be cast silently, cancelled instantly, and tailored to circumstance. In comparison, the potion offers no advantage except permanence during its effect. A wizard, under its influence, cannot apologize quietly, cannot explain the situation, cannot reassure frightened companions. Every attempt at explanation worsens the chaos. The potion's very reliability, its refusal to weaken, renders it impractical. One anecdote preserved by a later commentator describes a ministry clerk who accidentally ingested a diluted version of the potion, mistaking it for pepper-up. His attempt to inform his supervisor of the error resulted in the evacuation of 2 floors of the building. Windows cracked, ink bottles toppled, and a particularly sensitive filing cabinet was later said to have developed a permanent tremor. The potion worked flawlessly, and yet the incident ended with the clerk fined for magical disturbance and the remaining stock confiscated. The magic was not faulty, the concept was. There is also a social cruelty embedded in the potion's effect. Speech is not merely sound, but intention, nuance, and restraint. To strip the speaker of control is to reduce communication to brute force. Beadle's appendix includes a fragment of the inventor's correspondence, boasting that the potion restores speech to its primitive honesty. The claim ignores the reality that civilization, magical or otherwise, depends on moderation. A wizard, unable to lower their voice, cannot participate in lessons, negotiations, or even simple companionship without becoming an object of fear or ridicule. Magical creatures offer another lens through which the potion's uselessness becomes clear. Dragons, whose roars carry for miles, are not admired for their vocal power alone, but feared for the destruction that accompanies it. To mimic such a trait without the physical resilience of a dragon is absurdly dangerous. A human throat empowered to roar like a beast does not gain the beast's immunity to the consequences. The potion amplifies sound but does nothing to protect the drinker from backlash, social or magical. Some scholars have attempted to frame the roaring potion as an early experiment in sound-based magic, a crude ancestor to more refined spells. If this is true, its value lies only in historical curiosity. Beadle himself hinted at this when he wrote that many foolish brews pave the road to wiser enchantments. The potion becomes a cautionary tale rather than a usable artifact, illustrating the importance of control in magical design. The inventor's fate adds a melancholic tone to the potion's story. Later notes suggest he continued experimenting with vocal magic, each attempt growing more extreme. One unfinished recipe allegedly aimed to make the drinker's voice echo forever after death, an idea even Beadle declined to comment on beyond a single word. Unsettling. The roaring potion thus stands as a snapshot of obsession unchecked by practicality or empathy. In domestic life, the potion borders on tragic comedy. Imagine a parent attempting to scold a child and instead producing a roar that rattles the roof. Imagine a healer trying to reassure a patient only to cause panic with every word. These images are not hypothetical. Beadle recorded at least one case of a St. Mungo's intern banned from potion duty after suggesting controlled trials. The potion's presence alone was deemed a risk to morale. Even magical creatures accustomed to noise respond poorly. Owls, famously sensitive to sound, reportedly refused to approach a tower where a student had been dared to drink a sip. The resulting isolation lasted until the potion wore off, leaving the student hoarse, embarrassed, and thoroughly cured of curiosity. Magic that alienates its user so completely cannot claim a meaningful place in everyday wizarding life. Number 17. Tactlessness. Tonic. The potion of tactlessness occupies a curious corner of wizarding lore, not because it ever saved a life or unlocked a hidden door, but because it exposed something far more fragile: social balance. Brewed to flawless clarity and smelling faintly of nettles and overripe pears, it has no explosive finish, no glowing aura, no immediate magical utility. Instead, it rearranges the drinker's sense of propriety until every unfiltered thought marches straight to the tongue, polished only by the speaker's absolute confidence that brilliance is occurring. Those who have studied it in the margins of old potion manuals note that the potion does not create cruelty. It merely removes restraint. The afflicted wizard becomes convinced that honesty without empathy is a form of wit. This is why the potion is often described as a masterpiece of social catastrophe rather than chemical mischief. The victim experiences no confusion, no dizziness, no magical discomfort at all, only the steady, unstoppable urge to comment, criticize, and observe aloud, oblivious to the widening silence around them. A half-forgotten incident from the late 20th century still circulates among staff at Hogwarts, usually after the third glass of fire whiskey. According to this account, Professor Horace Slughorn once mistook a small crystal vial for a restorative draught during an exhausting term. Moments after swallowing it, he proceeded to deliver a full lecture on advanced potion catalysts, while casually remarking on students' intellectual limits, wardrobe failures, and family reputations, including several members of his own favoured slug club. What made the episode unforgettable was not the cruelty of the remarks, but the tone. Slughorn spoke with genial warmth, convinced he was being encouraging. He praised one Ravenclaw's remarkable ability to misunderstand instructions, admired a Hufflepuff's unwavering loyalty to mediocrity, and lamented aloud that the current crop of students lacked the sparkle of ambition that used to make teaching worthwhile. No hexes were cast, no detentions issued. The damage unfolded quietly, like frost spreading across glass. The potion's magic lies in its cruel precision. It strips away social intuition while sharpening articulation. Victims do not slur their words or lose grammar. They become eloquent executioners of their own reputations. This is why the potion is rarely catalogued among dark concoctions, yet is treated with equal caution. Unlike poisons that harm the body, this brew attacks trust, something far harder to mend. As one old marginal note reads, "Broken bones heal faster than broken dinners." In the pages of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, potion making is described as an art of subtle balances where intention matters as much as ingredients. The narration reminds readers that magic leaves traces, like footprints in snow, a line often cited by potion scholars when discussing long-term effects. The potion of tactlessness leaves no visible trace, yet its footprints linger in memories, glances, and the awkward rearrangement of seating at the Great Hall. It is little wonder that Fred and George Weasley once showed interest in acquiring the recipe. To them, social chaos was a currency. Yet even the twins reportedly rejected it as impractical. Pranks, after all, depend on timing and recovery. The potion of tactlessness offers neither. Once consumed, its effects can last hours, and apologies afterwards sound hollow because the victim remembers every word, and worse, remembers meaning them at the time. One former Gryffindor described witnessing a classmate under the potion's influence during a Hogsmeade weekend. The student spent an entire afternoon offering unsolicited evaluations of shopkeepers' personal lives, butterbeer quality, and passers-by's magical potential. By evening, friendships carefully built over 6 years collapsed into polite nods. The potion had not revealed truths, it had revealed impulses. That distinction is what makes the brew so insidious. Magical theorists argue that the potion amplifies the brain's confidence center while suppressing empathic response, creating a wizard who believes insight excuses injury. This aligns with a recurring theme in the books, where unchecked certainty leads to downfall. As the narration once observed, indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright dislike. The potion of tactlessness transforms indifference into vocalized neglect, making silence impossible. Unlike Veritaserum, which compels truth, this potion compels commentary. The drinker is not forced to answer questions, they volunteer observations with missionary zeal. This is why its use in interrogations was briefly proposed and swiftly banned. Truth extracted without care becomes distortion. A subject might reveal a secret but bury it under layers of unnecessary insult, rendering the information unusable and the room irreparably tense. The aftermath of Slughorn's infamous lecture reportedly required weeks of quiet diplomacy. Detentions were reassigned, seating rearranged, and several students requested transfers from his advanced classes. Slughorn himself, once the potion wore off, was said to be genuinely horrified, retreating into overcompensation through gifts of crystallized pineapple and excessive praise. Yet the spell had already done its work, proving that regret cannot always outpace memory. From a narrative standpoint, the potion of tactlessness embodies one of the series' most uncomfortable truths. Magic cannot replace kindness. The wizarding world possesses charms to mend bones overnight, yet lacks any reliable spell to retract spoken words. As one passage notes, words are, in my not-so-humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic. When misused, that magic scorches rather than illuminates. Collectors sometimes seek the potion for curiosity's sake, storing it among mislabeled curiosities. Sensible apothecaries refuse to stock it, citing not legal risk, but moral fatigue. A potion that guarantees humiliation offers no growth, no lesson, only wreckage. Even pranksters understand that laughter requires consent, and this brew grants none. It leaves only the echo of confidence where compassion should have been. In the end, the potion of tactlessness survives not because it is useful, but because it is revealing. It distills a human flaw into liquid form, proving that the most dangerous silencing charm is not cast on others, but removed from oneself. To drink it is to learn, too late, that reputation is more fragile than glass and far harder to transfigure back into shape. Number 18. Glassy Gaze Potion. The Glass Gaze Potion has long occupied an odd corner of wizarding lore, suspended somewhere between a cosmetic curiosity and a brewing mistake elevated to the dignity of a recipe. Mentioned only once in an obscure column of the Daily Prophet, it lingers in the collective imagination of potion makers as one of those concoctions whose existence poses more questions than answers. Its sole effect, to cloud the eyes of the drinker until they resemble polished marbles, seems almost intentionally trivial. Yet the persistence of the formula across centuries suggests that someone, at some point, believed such an effect worth preserving. This tension between utter uselessness and historical stubbornness makes it one of the most bewildering potions ever recorded. In theory, the potion promises a transformation evocative of a bewitched mannequin. A dull sheen settles over the iris, the pupils lose their dynamism, and the entire gaze becomes unsettlingly blank. The effect is not painful, nor is it permanent, but its immediate consequences are oddly disorienting. The drinker's vision blurs as though a fog has been trapped behind the sclera. A witch who tested it for the Prophet's Oddities of Potion Craft column remarked that the world turned into a hallway of ghosts where distance and shape refused to behave. Her description would later be dismissed by the Department of Magical Accidents, though it remains the most vivid account of the potion's nature. The peculiar history of the glass gaze potion becomes clearer when viewed against the broader backdrop of illusion magic in the wizarding world. Long before charm work matured into the delicate art found in the 20th century, potions often compensated for what spells could not elegantly achieve. The old apothecaries of York, where handwritten scrolls described early glamours, treated the potion as a rudimentary tool for unsettling an opponent. But as illusion spells developed, the potion's relevance waned. By the time Professor Slughorn taught advanced elixirs at Hogwarts, the potion had already faded into the margins of his syllabus, noted only as an example of a mixture whose ambition exceeded its practical use. There exists, however, one curious anecdote that kept the potion from falling entirely into oblivion. In 1873, the eccentric inventor Crispin Fleetwater attempted to market the brew as part of his stage persona during a series of magical performances in Diagon Alley. Fleetwater, known for his theatrical flair, believed that appearing emotionless would strengthen his illusion of invulnerability. His idea backfired almost immediately. Witnesses reported that he could no longer see the pyrotechnic spells erupting around him and stumbled blindly into a levitating drum. The Prophet later mocked his spectacle, calling it the first case in which the potion lived up to its reputation as a hazard masquerading as an accessory. What truly solidified the potion's notoriety was its unintended impact on self-perception. The blank reflection returned in a mirror unsettles even the most confident witch or wizard. Many describe the feeling as if they were staring into a version of themselves emptied of intention or soul. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry reflects on the chilling emptiness in Professor Umbridge's expression, the text observes, "Her eyes were large and empty of warmth, like two chips of polished bone." Though unrelated to the potion, this line captures perfectly what drinkers of the glass gaze potion experience, an eerie stripping of vitality. The absence of any strategic benefit becomes even more striking when contrasted with potions uniquely suited for theatrics, such as the sleek glamour tonics used in the wizarding fashion world. Designers like Demelza Fry rely on luminous, charm-enhancing mixtures rather than dulling ones. Her famous remark, "A gaze should captivate, not petrify," is often quoted at potion symposiums to highlight how thoroughly the glass gaze potion contradicts aesthetic tradition. Instead of enhancing presence, it diminishes it entirely, reducing the drinker to a hollow echo of their usual self. There have been occasional attempts to rebrand the potion as a tool for intimidation. Certain Nocturne Alley vendors once boasted that a predatory emptiness in the eyes could give smugglers an advantage by making them appear unpredictable. This theory collapsed quickly during ministry crackdowns when Aura Benedict Thorne documented that every alleged smuggler using the potion had severely impaired depth perception. His report dryly noted that one suspect attempted a menacing stride forward and instead collided with a barrel of doxy repellent. Thorne's observations effectively ended the potion's brief popularity among those seeking a criminal edge. Students at Hogwarts often encounter the potion only as a humorous footnote in textbooks, yet they remain fascinated by how a recipe with no practical application endures. Several student journals over the years reflect a mixture of curiosity and disappointment. A notable entry by Miranda Pitchford a seventh-year Ravenclaw, describes her brewing experiment in vivid detail. The potion shimmered like liquefied fog, emitting a faint scent of cold metal. When she tested a droplet upon her fingertip, she claimed the skin felt temporarily numb, as though emotion had momentarily retreated. Her reaction demonstrates that the potion exerts not just a visual transformation but an atmospheric one, influencing the drinker's sense of presence in the world. From a technical standpoint, the potion should have been dismissed as alchemical clutter. Yet for historians of magic, it offers insight into the shifting priorities of the wizarding world. Early alchemists valued symbolic gestures, believing that a lifeless gaze could intimidate spirits or ward off spectral tricksters. Although no modern magical creature expresses any particular fear of cloudy eyes, the persistence of these archaic beliefs underscores how wizarding culture evolves unevenly. Some relics remain in circulation simply because tradition resists pruning, even when logic dictates otherwise. Furthermore, the potion bears a cautionary significance. It demonstrates how magical innovation can veer toward the absurd when ambition overrides necessity. When master brewer Lucinda Blott catalogued useless potions for her anthology, Brews Best Forgotten, she devoted an entire chapter to the glass gaze potion, calling it the triumphant masterpiece of impractical wizard vanity. Her commentary explains that many early brews sought novelty rather than utility, creating a landscape littered with oddities. The potion thus becomes a mirror reflecting not only the drinker's blank stare but the eccentricity of magical experimentation itself. Perhaps the most striking aspect of the potion is how it warps social interaction. Those under its effect often report that others instinctively step back or lower their voices, uncertain how to interpret the artificial hollowness. A famous example occurred during a St. Mungo's charity gala when the magical botanist Rowan Hartley tested a modified version to amuse his colleagues. The unintended result was a room full of startled spectators and Hartley wandering aimlessly among the tables, knocking over a silver punch bowl. His own recounting notes that he remembered everything but felt disconnected from the rhythm of the world, an oddly poetic description of a potion that otherwise garners laughter. The realm of wizarding cosmetics also rejects the potion, though it technically qualifies. Modern charm-based beautification emphasizes fluidity, warmth, and expressiveness. The potion, offering the opposite, has never appealed to professionals who craft appearances for public figures. Even Celestina Warbeck, famed for theatrical extravagance, remarked in an interview that no performer would willingly surrender the spark in their eyes. The potion's failure to find even a niche among performers highlights its impracticality, especially when illusions can achieve similar effects safely and temporarily without impairing vision. It is tempting to compare the glass gaze potion to the Imperious Curse, though the similarity is purely visual. Under the curse, the victim's eyes lose focus, described in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire as glassy and distant, as if seeing something far beyond the room. Yet the curse strips agency, while the potion merely simulates the vacant aesthetic. The comparison underscores a strange irony. While the potion mimics the look of a magically controlled person, it confers no control whatsoever, and instead leaves the user stumbling in confusion. It is a theatrical hollowing, not a functional one. One might ask why the potion persists at all, when a simple illusion charm such as Illusia Oculis can replicate its effects instantaneously. The answer lies less in utility than in sentimentality. Certain magical scholars argue that the potion is a cultural artifact, a surviving emblem of a time when wizarding society relied more heavily on brews than charms for aesthetic enhancements. Just as old families treasure outmoded enchanted heirlooms, potion makers preserve recipes like this one to maintain continuity with the past. In this sense, the potion serves as a bridge between eras rather than an instrument with purpose. There remains one surprisingly modern use case, though unintentional, wizarding photographs. In an age where moving portraits capture personality through subtle motion, the potion produces images that are unintentionally comedic. A witch who consumed it while taking celebratory graduation photos later lamented that her picture resembled a startled troll in formal robes. The entire situation sparked a minor trend on social media platforms like SpellSnap, where students ironically imitated the effect without using the potion. It became known as the Mannequin Glare Challenge, proof that the potion's only cultural legacy may be its contribution to magical internet humor. Ultimately, the glass gaze potion survives not because it is needed, but because it reminds the magical world of its own eccentricities. Its very uselessness is what makes it compelling. Wizards, unlike muggles, rarely discard their peculiarities. They preserve them, analyze them, reinterpret them, and occasionally laugh about them. The potion may never find practical application, but its presence in the annals of magical history ensures it will remain a topic of fascination. Number 19. Slow Wink Elixir. The slow-blinking potion has long puzzled potion masters, romantic opportunists, and even the more eccentric members of the Wizarding Theatrical Guild. It is a brew that promises no power, no meaningful enhancement, and no known practical use. Instead, it grants its drinker a painfully awkward trait. Every blink becomes 10 times slower than normal, stretching into a strange, deliberate motion that appears almost taunting. According to the Department of Experimental Potions, this effect lasts anywhere from 15 minutes to 3 hours, depending on the brewer's precision, though no one has ever reported the experience as pleasant. Most wizards find it deeply uncomfortable both to witness and to endure. The invention of this potion is credited to Cygnus Pottleby, a Hogwarts student of the early 20th century, whose academic records suggest a mind capable of brilliance, but inclined toward questionable experimentation. His notes describe the brew as an exploration in involuntary expression. Rumor has it that Pottleby created it after reading a line in Hogwarts, a history which mentioned ancient theatrical enchantments used to exaggerate facial expressions on stage. Inspired, he attempted to replicate the effect alchemically. The result, as later generations discovered, was hardly the breakthrough he had hoped for. Anyone curious enough to test the potion quickly finds that it interferes with the natural rhythm of blinking so profoundly that the eyes remain half closed for a dreadfully long moment. This produces an expression that is neither charming nor seductive but strangely accusatory, as though the drinker were silently implying something scandalous. Even Professor Slughorn, in one of his more indulgent remarks, once commented that "You could bottle confidence, my boy, but some things should not be bottled at all," and many believe he had this potion in mind. The slow-blinking potion did not by any stretch make its way into his famed Slug Club gatherings. One recorded incident involving the potion became particularly memorable among Hogwarts gossip circles. Lavender Brown, well known for her enthusiastic approach to romance during her 6th year, once attracted the attention of a Gryffindor 7th year named Crispin Forley. Convinced that he needed something special to impress her, Crispin turned to the potions section of the library and stumbled upon Pottleby's forgotten formula. Believing that a slow, deliberate wink might appear mysterious and alluring, he brewed the potion late at night, completely missing the footnote indicating that the effect was widely considered socially catastrophic. Crispin consumed the potion moments before meeting Lavender near the fat lady's portrait. When she smiled at him, expecting a normal greeting, he attempted an affectionate wink. Instead, his eyelid descended with excruciating slowness, pausing halfway as though he were trying to convey a secret message meant only for her. Several students passing by later described the expression as an uncomfortable mixture of suspicion and poorly executed flirtation. Lavender, stunned by this inexplicable display, did not interpret it as romantic in the slightest. As the effect continued, Crispin found himself incapable of blinking at a normal pace whatsoever. His eyes moved sluggishly, giving him the appearance of someone attempting to feign emotional depth without quite knowing how. Lavender, mortified by the attention the moment was drawing, reacted instinctively and gave him a quick smack to the back of the head, convinced he was mocking her. The blow snapped his head forward but did nothing to restore his blinking speed, which made the scene even more bizarre. The event spread across Gryffindor Tower before supper, immortalizing Crispin Fawley in the castle's long history of ill-advised romantic decisions. A few days later, Professor McGonagall was said to have commented, while passing a group of whispering students, that some potions ought not to be brewed outside a properly supervised environment. Though she did not address the scandal directly, everyone understood the reference. In truth, the slow-blinking potion was soon added to a list maintained by the school's staff, items strongly discouraged for use during social occasions. Its reputation was sealed, and not even the Weasley twins, who once joked about the endless possibilities of a wink that lasts an eternity, ever stocked it at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. The potion's uselessness becomes even more apparent when compared to other seemingly frivolous magical concoctions. Even the laughing draught, which causes bouts of uncontrollable giggling, has therapeutic and entertainment value. The slow-blinking potion, on the other hand, offers neither joy nor practical mischief. It is too subtle to serve as a prank and too uncomfortable to be used in performance without risking the audience's sympathy. Actors in the Wizarding Theatrical Guild once attempted to incorporate it into a dramatic retelling of The Fountain of Fair Fortune, but the experiment ended poorly when the lead actress could not time her blinks with the stage cues. The Ministry of Magic eventually investigated whether the potion might have any medicinal applications. St. Mungo's researchers, including the renowned healer Miriam Platt, analyzed the brew for potential benefits in treating nerve-related blinking disorders. Their findings were unanimous. The potion did not correct abnormal blinking patterns but imposed an entirely new one, rendering it clinically unhelpful. Healer Platt reportedly wrote in her notes that the brew accomplishes nothing except the creation of unnecessary frustration. With this dismissal, hopes for its medical use dissolved entirely. Still, the potion endures in the collective memory of students and scholars because it reveals something fundamental about magical culture. Wizards often create spells and potions for reasons that defy utility. Much like the charm that makes teacups hum, or the enchantment that forces quills to write in perfect circles, some inventions simply exist because they can. The slow-blinking potion is a testament to magical curiosity, unrestrained by practicality, a reminder that the craft of potion-making is as whimsical as it is scientific. Even Severus Snape, meticulous and unsentimental, once referenced obscure potions in a lesson by remarking that not all brewers possess ambition equal to their ability. Though he was not specifically describing Pottlebury, many students assume the comment applies to him. After all, the potion demonstrates considerable technical skill. Its brewing process is elaborate, requiring crushed asphodel root and the steam of moon-touched water. Yet the final result yields nothing of value. It stands as an ironic monument to unnecessary brilliance. Nevertheless, some eccentrics continue to experiment with variations of the potion. One such figure is Theodora Fleetwick, a cousin of Professor Phileas Flitwick, and a dramaturge fascinated with exaggerated emotional expression. She once attempted to use the potion to enhance the performance of magical creatures in a stage adaptation of the Tales of Beedle the Bard. However, even she found the effect unusable. Her notes mention that no audience wishes to spend an evening watching elves blink as though trapped in a perpetual moment of indecision. After that, she moved on to more sophisticated enchantments. Even magical historians occasionally ponder whether the potion symbolizes something deeper about wizard psychology. Some suggest it exposes a tendency among young wizards to believe that romance can be enhanced through theatrics rather than sincerity. Lavender Brown herself once wrote in a private journal entry that romance does not need tricks, it needs honesty, echoing Hermione Granger's well-known statement about love being a much more complicated matter than any potion can account for. Crispin Forley, whose misadventure inadvertently illustrated this point, later pursued a quiet career as a ministry clerk and allegedly refused to discuss the incident ever again. The slow-blinking potion's legacy persists for one simple reason. It is a perfect example of how magic can amplify human foolishness rather than solve it. The user hopes for charm but achieves awkwardness. They seek mystery but create confusion. In the end, they learn, as countless witches and wizards have, that a potion cannot manufacture the kind of presence one hopes to project. Even the Amatentia, with all its dangerous allure, at least demonstrates the powerful consequences of attempting to manipulate affection. The slow-blinking potion demonstrates only the consequences of poor judgment. Some potion scholars now include it in lectures about magical ethics, using it as a harmless illustration of misguided intent. It lacks the danger of cursed drafts and the moral implications of love potions, but it still teaches that not everything that can be brewed should be attempted. Students often laugh at the example, especially when they learn of Crispin's ill-fated attempt at romance. Yet the underlying lesson remains: magic is a tool, not a substitute for genuine human interaction. Even in this context, the potion holds a strange appeal to collectors of magical oddities. Certain potion archives, such as the Alchemical Museum of York, include preserved vials labeled "for display only." Visitors often stare at the cloudy mixture and wonder why anyone would willingly consume it. The museum's description card states simply that the brew encapsulates the whimsical failures of wizard ingenuity. Noting that its creation reflects a universal truth about the magical world, not every innovation leads to improvement. Ultimately, the slow-blinking potion survives as a charming reminder of magical experimentation at its most unnecessary. It is harmless, embarrassing, and entirely devoid of practical application. Yet its story enriches the magical landscape, providing a glimpse into the quirks and missteps that shape wizarding history. Magic, after all, is not merely about grand feats or heroic enchantments. It is also about the small, peculiar inventions that reveal the human desire to embellish, impress, and sometimes misjudge spectacularly. If nothing else, the potion has earned a comfortable place in Hogwarts lore. Students recount the tale of Crispin Forley with the same enthusiasm reserved for Peeves's pranks or Nearly Headless Nick's unfortunate beheading. As long as there are young wizards seeking attention, approval, or affection, stories like this one will flourish, and perhaps that is the potion's true legacy, not its effect, but the reminder that even in a world of wonders, the human heart remains wonderfully flawed. Number 20. Predictability Draft. The pink potion of predictability occupies a curious, almost embarrassing corner of Hogwarts' long and often reckless history of experimental brews. Its liquid glows with an artificial rose hue that never quite matches the natural colors favored by respectable potioneers, as if the potion itself were already signaling its lack of subtlety. According to archived notes attributed to Adalbert Waffling's lesser-known student Melisandre Firkins, the potion was initially conceived as a theoretical exercise. What would happen if free will were dampened, not erased, but smoothed into a set of reliable patterns? When brewed correctly, the potion does not paralyze or silence the drinker. Instead, it flattens personality into something eerily uniform, producing a human being who behaves exactly as expected in every situation, no more and no less. Those who have observed the potion's effects describe a transformation that is not violent but deeply unsettling. The drinker's voice settles into a neutral cadence, their gestures lose spontaneity, and their reactions become painfully easy to anticipate. Laughter occurs at the socially correct moment and always sounds the same, a short, measured exhale that never grows louder or softer. Opinions, once sharp or contradictory, soften into polite agreement or passive disinterest. The ministry once summarized the effect in a dry internal memo, noting that subjects demonstrated no deviation from statistically probable responses. In other words, unpredictability, the very spark of human magic, was quietly extinguished. The most infamous documented use of the pink potion of predictability took place during the tenure of Professor Armando Dippet, long before the era dominated by Albus Dumbledore's eccentric tolerance. In one autumn term, several first-year students, including Barnabas Cuff and Elspeth Moon, proved unusually disruptive in the corridors, enchanted suits of armor, marching without permission, and interrupting lessons with uncontrolled spell work. A well-meaning but disastrously unimaginative staff member authorized the potion as a disciplinary measure. The intention was temporary obedience. What followed was an eerie spectacle, rows of children standing motionless after class, responding to every question with identical phrases such as, "I agree completely," or "That does not interest me," as if their minds had been gently but firmly locked. Observers quickly realized that predictability did not equate to usefulness. The enchanted children did not learn better, they learned less. When asked to perform spells, they executed only the most obvious version, refusing instinctively to improvise or correct mistakes. One transfiguration lesson had to be abandoned entirely when 3 students attempted to turn matchsticks into needles and, upon failing, simply repeated the same flawed motion over and over, convinced that expected effort was sufficient. The situation echoed a warning later voiced in another context when it was written that it is our choices that show what we truly are. Stripped of meaningful choice, the students became hollow reflections of what Hogwarts sought to cultivate. The potion's side effects soon proved more severe than its creators anticipated. Subjects could remain standing in place for hours if no external expectation prompted them to move. Caretaker records mention finding students in corridors after curfew, still upright and calm, explaining without distress that there was no reason to go elsewhere. This state was not sleep, not paralysis, but a passive suspension of initiative. Healers from St. Mungo's later concluded that the potion suppressed the internal impulse to act unless an action was socially or logically demanded. In effect, the drinker's mind outsourced decision-making entirely to the environment. Attempts to find practical applications for the potion inevitably drifted toward morally grey territory. A proposal briefly circulated within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement suggested its use during interrogations, on the theory that a predictable suspect would be easier to manage. The idea was rejected after a single controlled trial demonstrated that predictability did not equal truthfulness. Subjects answered questions calmly but offered only what they believed the questioner wanted to hear, producing statements so agreeable they were entirely unreliable. Truth, like magic, requires friction, resistance, and the possibility of surprise. Within Hogwarts itself, the potion acquired a darker reputation among older students. By the time Minerva McGonagall was a young professor, the pink potion of predictability had already become a cautionary tale told in potions class. She reportedly warned that the brew created the illusion of order without the substance of understanding, a judgment borne out by years of failed experimentation. Even Severus Snape, whose tolerance for unpleasant potions was famously high, dismissed it as intellectually lazy. Predictability, he argued in marginal notes later discovered in the library, was the enemy of mastery because a predictable wizard could never outthink an opponent or adapt under pressure. Despite its obvious shortcomings, the potion fascinated scholars precisely because of its philosophical implications. Magical theory has long accepted that intention shapes outcome, that emotion and willpower infuse spells with strength or weakness. The pink potion of predictability appeared to sever intention from action. Drinkers still performed magic, but their spells lacked character, producing results that were technically correct, yet lifeless. A charm cast under its influence worked because it was supposed to work, not because the caster meant it. This distinction unsettled many, recalling the somber observation that magic leaves traces, not just in the air, but in the soul. The potion also raised uncomfortable questions about authority and control within magical education. If a student could be made compliant so easily, what stopped more ambitious administrators from dreaming of larger-scale use? The answer, ultimately, was boredom. Predictable students were unbearable companions. They offered no curiosity, no challenge, no spark of rebellion that drives learning forward. Ravenclaw prefect Helena Brookshire famously complained that study groups under the potion were like revising with enchanted parchment that answers back. Even discipline lost its meaning when defiance disappeared entirely. One particularly illustrative case involved a Hufflepuff student named Thomas Ketteridge, known for his reckless kindness and constant rule-bending in favor of helping others. After ingesting the potion during a misguided experiment, Thomas ceased sneaking out at night to deliver food to the kitchens for homesick classmates. When asked why, he replied evenly that no one expected it. The school realized then that predictability did not merely suppress misbehavior, it erased virtue that exceeded expectation. Courage, generosity, and loyalty often manifest precisely when no one anticipates them. Over time, the potion's reputation sank from dangerous curiosity to academic embarrassment. It remained listed in restricted brewing manuals not because it was powerful, but because it represented a dead end. Potion makers thrive on complexity, on the delicate balance of ingredients that produce layered effects. The pink potion of predictability offered only one outcome, endlessly repeated. Its very consistency made it dull. As one anonymous margin note in a fifth-year textbook summarized, it works perfectly, and that is why it fails. The wizarding world has always valued individuality, even when it causes chaos. From Fred and George Weasley's calculated anarchy to Luna Lovegood's unapologetic eccentricity, unpredictability is often framed as a quiet virtue. Against this cultural backdrop, the pink potion stands as a reminder of what is lost when behavior is engineered for convenience. It can make a person easier to manage, easier to ignore, and infinitely less human. In a world where even portraits argue and staircases move of their own accord, such enforced sameness feels profoundly unmagical. The potion's continued existence in Hogwarts archives serves a symbolic purpose rather than a practical one. It is occasionally shown to advanced students as an example of magic that technically succeeds while philosophically failing. Professors emphasize that not all effective spells are worth casting. The potion teaches nothing about courage, wisdom, or ambition, and it offers no insight into the unpredictable nature of life itself. Its rose-colored sheen masks an absence at its core, a reminder that control without understanding is merely stagnation. In the end, the pink potion of predictability remains exactly what its critics claim, useful only if one's goal is to transform a living mind into a boring certainty. It cannot inspire, protect, or enlighten. It produces no heroes, no villains, and no stories worth telling. In a castle built on secrets, surprises, and the quiet hope that students will exceed expectations, such a potion has no true home. It lingers not as a tool, but as a warning sealed in glass and dust, predictably forgotten until someone curious enough decides to ask why it should never be used again. Number 21. Anti-Yawn Elixir. In the quiet hierarchy of Hogwarts potions, where Felix Felicis promises improbable triumph and Polyjuice Potion reshapes identity itself, there exists a far less glamorous concoction whose reputation borders on mockery, the reverse yawning potion. Its sole function is deceptively simple. After ingestion, the drinker becomes physically incapable of yawning for several hours. No matter how exhausted the body, no matter how dull the lecture or sleepless the night, the reflex is locked away as if sealed behind a charm. The potion is mentioned only in passing in the wider magical tradition, yet its existence reveals something deeply uncomfortable about wizarding attitudes toward discipline, bodily control, and the quiet cruelty of practical magic. The potion's origin is closely tied to one of Hogwarts' most infamous classroom experiences, History of Magic under Professor Binns. Binns, a ghost who famously went on teaching, having died in his sleep in front of the staff room fire, embodied endurance through stagnation. His lectures droned on with a monotony so legendary that even Hermione Granger, the most diligent student of her generation, struggled to remain alert. The text itself remarks that students fought sleep constantly, and Harry once reflected that Binns spoke without pausing for breath, a detail that quietly explains why yawning became a near-universal rebellion against his lessons. The reverse yawning potion was reportedly developed in the late 19th century by a ministry-adjacent potioneer named Septimus Blott, whose personal writings describe the potion as an aid to academic decorum. Blott believed yawning to be not merely a biological reflex, but a sign of moral laxity, a public insult to authority. In his notebooks, he argued that magic should assist the will in triumphing over the flesh. When tested on a group of Ravenclaw students preparing for OWLs, the potion performed exactly as intended. Not a single yawn escaped them for nearly 6 hours. What Blott failed to anticipate was the body's stubborn insistence on its own needs. Yawning is not a choice, it is a neurological reflex tied to oxygen regulation, fatigue, and brain cooling. When the potion suppresses the outward action, the internal urge does not disappear. Instead, it accumulates. Test subjects described a mounting pressure behind the jaw, a stretching ache in the throat, and a strange pulling sensation around the eyes. One student noted that her face felt frozen halfway to relief, an expression that lasted until the potion wore off. This detail alone explains why the potion never entered widespread classroom use, despite early enthusiasm from certain Hogwarts governors. In one recorded incident, a Hufflepuff fifth year drank the potion before Binns's lecture on the Goblin Rebellions of 1752. By the end of class, her jaw trembled uncontrollably, her eyes watered constantly, and her facial muscles spasmed into what Pomfrey later described as sustained magical tension. The student had not yawned, but neither had she learned a single fact about goblin history. The irony is that the wizarding world already knew the dangers of suppressing natural, magical, biological processes. St. Mungo's archives repeatedly warn against charms that override reflexes, citing cases where suppressed sneezing led to internal hex buildup and unexpressed laughter caused magical feedback in the diaphragm. Yet the reverse yawning potion was treated as harmless, perhaps because yawning itself is so socially trivialized. In a culture obsessed with visible discipline, straight backs, still hands, silent attention, magic that enforces outward compliance often escapes ethical scrutiny. Even within Hogwarts, reactions were divided. Minerva McGonagall reportedly dismissed the potion as an inelegant solution to a non-problem, while Severus Snape criticized it for its imprecision, noting that any potion that creates more discomfort than it alleviates is a failure of craft. Slughorn, by contrast, found it amusing and once suggested it could be useful at ministry banquets, where boredom was a matter of political survival. These conflicting views underscore the potion's strange position, clever, functional, and yet fundamentally misguided. The most revealing aspect of the reverse yawning potion is that it addresses appearance rather than reality. A student under its influence still feels exhausted, still struggles to focus, still longs for sleep, but now lacks the one small physical release that acknowledges that state. In this way, the potion becomes a metaphor for certain strands of wizarding education itself, which often prizes endurance over understanding. As Binns himself never noticed whether students were awake or asleep, the potion solved nothing he cared about, only what others wanted to see. There is a haunting parallel between the potion's effect and the way Binns teaches. Just as the potion traps the yawn inside the body, Binns traps history inside dates and names, never allowing it to breathe. Hermione once complained that his lessons lacked context, emotion, or narrative, and the text dryly observes that not even the wars seemed very exciting when Professor Binns was telling you about them. The potion and the professor are aligned in spirit. Both suppress visible reaction while ignoring internal engagement. Attempts to repurpose the potion for practical use have consistently failed. Aurors briefly considered it for stakeouts, hoping it might prevent yawning-induced exposure, but abandoned the idea after one trainee became so distracted by jaw pain that he missed a suspect entirely. A healer suggested it for patients with compulsive yawning charms gone wrong, only to discover that magical suppression worsened the underlying enchantment. Even pranksters found it unsatisfying. The humor faded quickly when the victim's discomfort became obvious. One particularly telling case involved Percy Weasley during his early ministry career. Determined to appear indefatigable, he reportedly experimented with the potion before long nights of paperwork. Colleagues noticed his rigid expression and strained politeness, and by morning he suffered a splitting headache that no pepper-up potion could fully cure. Percy later abandoned the practice, concluding that looking awake is not the same as being effective, a rare moment of self-awareness that echoes the potion's central lesson. The potion also raises uncomfortable questions about consent and authority. When a charm or potion is used to override involuntary behavior, especially in children, the line between discipline and coercion blurs. Hogwarts famously values free will. Students choose their houses, their electives, even whether to attend lessons like divination. But the idea of chemically enforcing attentiveness suggests a darker impulse. That the potion was ever considered acceptable reveals how easily magic can be used to prioritize order over well-being. In the broader tapestry of magical lore, the reverse yawning potion stands as a cautionary curiosity rather than a triumph. Unlike cursed objects or dark spells, it does not announce its danger. Its harm is subtle, cumulative, and largely invisible to observers. A student who cannot yawn looks attentive. Only the student feels the strain. This disconnect makes the potion especially insidious, a reminder that magic judged solely by outward effect often conceals internal cost. The wizarding world often celebrates cleverness for its own sake, and the potion is undeniably clever. It accomplishes exactly what it promises, but usefulness in magic, as in life, is not defined by technical success alone. A spell or potion must harmonize with the body and mind it affects. By forcing the body into silence, the reverse yawning potion turns a harmless reflex into a source of suffering, answering the question, why, with an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes magic exists not because it should, but simply because it can.